afternoon and welcome to IBA News this Monday, the 19th of September. I'm Elon Aslan-Levy, joining you live from Jerusalem. In Hebron this afternoon, border police foiled an attempted stabbing attack at a checkpoint outside the Tomb of the Patriarchs. A border police officer was lightly wounded in his hand after two knife-wielding Palestinian terrorists attempted to attack security forces. One of the terrorists was shot dead and the other critically injured. Police officials said the two terrorists are from the Hebron area and had arrived at the site with the intention of attacking Israeli security forces. The incident marked the 8th terror attack against Israeli civilians and security forces since Friday morning. Earlier, terror also raised its head in Jerusalem when a Palestinian terrorist stabbed two border police officers near the old city's Herod's Gate. The two officers suffered serious to moderate wounds, and the terrorist, an Israeli identity card holder, was shot and critically injured by security forces. Marga Dudkevich reports.
Shortly after 7 this morning, a terrorist armed with a knife followed the two border police officers as they patrolled the area near the old city's Herod's Gate. Coming up from behind, he pulled out his knife and stabbed them several times before he was shot by one of the wounded officers and subdued.
A short while ago at the Herod's Gate on the outskirts of the old city, a Palestinian terrorist stabbed two Israeli officers. The terrorist was shot by our police officer who responded immediately to a life-threatening situation. The area around the old city of Jerusalem was closed off.
The condition of the female police officer was described as serious after she suffered stab wounds to the neck and was taken to Shaare Tzedek Hospital, where she underwent surgery. The male police officer suffered stab wounds to his upper body and was taken to Hadassah Hospital in Karem, where doctors described his condition as moderate. The terrorist, who was critically injured and also taken to hospital, was identified as Iman al-Qud, aged 20, from the East Jerusalem neighborhood of Ras al-Amud, the holder of an Israeli identity card. This morning's attack was the 7th terror attack since Friday and the 2nd in the old city. On Friday, border police shot and killed a Jordanian terrorist who attempted to stab them outside Damascus Gate. Marga Dudkevich, IBA News.
In the wake of today's attacks, the police decided to implement plans to increase security in Jerusalem ahead of the holidays earlier than scheduled. The beefed-up police presence began this afternoon with the deployment of hundreds of officers and border police across the capital. The decision was made at the end of a special meeting convened by Jerusalem District Police Commander Yoram Halevi. For his part, Public Security Minister Gilad Erdan said that he will take all necessary actions to ensure that the home of the East Jerusalem terrorist who carried out today's attack in the old city will be demolished. Erdan said it is the government's obligation to take all measures that can deter terrorists from carrying out further attacks. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and US President Barack Obama will meet Wednesday in New York, a day before Netanyahu is set to address the United Nations General Assembly. It will be the first meeting between the two in almost a year. White House Press Secretary Josh Earnest told reporters the two will discuss the strong ties between Israel and the US. He said the meeting will also give them an opportunity to discuss the need for progress on the two-state solution in the face of what he termed deeply troubling trends on the ground. Other issues expected to be on the agenda are the US-led nuclear deal with Iran, as well as other security issues. This meeting could be the last between the two leaders before President Obama's term ends in January 2017 and comes days after Washington and Jerusalem sealed a $38 billion 10-year security aid package. Back at home, Yair Lapid, chairman of the Yesh Atid party, has announced his plans to run for the premiership in the next elections. Speaking during a party meeting in Rishon LeZion, Lapid said Yesh Atid will compete with the goal of becoming the ruling party, as two recent polls suggest is in reach, and pledged that if he is elected prime minister, his coalition's first law will be to limit the premier's tenure to no more than 2 terms in office, including reform to fix the term of a parliament. Among other proposals, Lapid expressed a desire to hold a regional summit to promote the reconstruction and demilitarization of Gaza and a divorce from the Palestinians by means of a demilitarized Palestinian state in which the IDF would retain freedom of action. Nearly a week after suffering a stroke, former President Shimon Peres remains in serious but stable condition. The 93-year-old veteran statesman's physician said he is able to respond to their instructions and even managed to move his left hand. This after the medical team at Tel Ashomer's Sheba Medical Center announced they would gradually begin attempts to wean Peres off life support. The ninth president had been in a medically induced coma after suffering a stroke last Tuesday. The extent of the damage remains unclear at this stage. The defense stages in the trial of IDF Sergeant Elora Zaria continued today as retired generals took to the stand to defend the shooting of a wounded Palestinian terrorist in Hebron. Speaking from the stand, Reserve Major General Uzi Dayan argued that combat soldiers should not be subjected to criminal trials for operational mistakes in the absence of a good reason, such as suspicion of malice. He further insisted that the military police ought not investigate operational activity at all for want of appropriate experience or expertise. Dayan also testified that he himself, as a commander, had given orders to kill terrorists, regardless of their condition, whether they are dangerous or not. Reserve General Danny Beaton further accused the military police of covering up the truth in order to convict Azaria, saying the soldier acted as expected in a moment of perceived danger. Despite the US administration's apology for the errant bombing of Syrian regime troops leading to the deaths of at least 60 Syrian soldiers, the incident has presented the Russian and Syrian governments with a propaganda opportunity. Margo Dudkevich has the story.
Moscow said Americans' actions was evidence that Washington is helping the jihadist elements fighting in Syria, claiming this was seen at the sites targeted, which briefly allowed ISIS fighters to overrun the Syrian army's position. The fragile ceasefire brokered a week ago by the US and Russia is already showing signs of fraying. Yesterday on the ground in Syria, regime fighter jets bombed opposition neighborhoods in Aleppo, and helicopters dropped barrel bombs on a village in the south of the country, killing at least 9 civilians. At Russia's request, the United Nations Security Council convened an emergency meeting to discuss the US airstrike, with both Syrian and Russian officials condemning Washington.
Having conducted this airstrike, the United States has violated 2 of its commitments. One is the commitment to cessation of hostilities, which the United States undertook together with us in February, and which we reconfirmed just a few days ago. And the other is the commitment the United States gave to the government of Syria when the United States started its air campaign 2 years ago. All my years in the United Nations, that is over 10 years, and all my years in international life, I've never seen, which is over 40 years, I've never seen such an extraordinary display of American heavy-handedness as we're witnessing today.
Speaking from the summit of the non-aligned movement in Venezuela, Syria's ambassador to the UN, Bashar Jafari, accused the US of actively working to destroy the fragile peace plan in Syria.
We are still gathering information at this time, but we have been able to confirm that earlier today, the United States struck what we believe to be an ISIL target. We halted the attack when we were informed by Russia that it was possible that we were striking Syrian regime military personnel and vehicles. We are investigating the incident. Now, because of a single airstrike, a strike that if it struck regime forces, did so in error, a strike that we have swiftly acknowledged and committed to investigating, again, none of which the Assad regime or Russia have done in their airstrikes on innocent civilians.
Attempts to achieve 7 consecutive days of calm in Syria appear to have failed. But American officials believe there's still a chance to reach a total cessation in hostilities. At the same time, US Secretary of State John Kerry pointed the finger at Russia, accusing Moscow of failing to pressure President Bashar Assad's government to allow humanitarian aid into Syria and halt all bombing on its civilians. Margo Dudkevich, IBA News.
Turning to the US, where a series of incidents have raised concern of possible terrorism. Early this morning, police in New Jersey detonated a suspicious package near a train station in the city of Elizabeth. 2 men scavenging trash near the train station had found a suspicious backpack containing several pipe bombs. Local mayor Chris Bolwag said that one of the devices exploded as it was being disarmed. The New Jersey Transit rail system halted rail service near Newark Airport due to the police activity. Today's incident comes after the US was shaken by 3 attacks this weekend, including an explosion in New York that left at least 29 people injured, a stabbing incident at a Minnesota shopping mall which wounded 9, and the explosion of another improvised device in Seaside Park, New Jersey, which produced no injuries. The New York Police Department announced today that it is seeking 28-year-old Ahmed Khan Rahami in connection to Saturday's bombings in Manhattan. Although his role in the incident remains unclear, his family has ties to Afghanistan, and police are looking into the possibility that Rahami could have been influenced by international terrorist groups or the conflict in his homeland. Officials stressed that so far they cannot identify any definitive links between the incidents, and that federal and local law enforcement are feverishly working to determine what exactly happened and why. Last night, an ISIS-linked news agency reported that the Islamic State claimed responsibility for the Minnesota stabbing attack. It said the suspect, a man of Somali descent, was a militant of the group. The assailant was shot and killed by an off-duty police officer who happened to be at the scene. Commuters in Israel prepare for a week of travel chaos around Tel Aviv. Israel Railways today began an 8-day repair and upgrade work project, wreaking havoc on the city's transportation system and creating massive snarl-ups. 3 of Tel Aviv's 4 major stations, namely Savidor, the University and Hashalom, were completely shut down and most tracks were removed. Trains leading into Tel Aviv from the south will run up only to the city's Haganah station, while those travelling from the north will stop at Herzliya. Hoping to ease the already congested traffic, the Transportation Ministry is operating special buses to shuttle an estimated 30,000 commuters from those locations to the closed Tel Aviv stations, which will continue to be served by regular city buses. The vote by the British public in June to exit the European Union has prompted much deliberation about the future, and now some British Jews descended from German refugees are seeking German passports to enable them to retain the benefits of EU citizenship. Ari O'Sullivan has more.
There are numerous far-reaching ramifications of the Brexit vote, some of them strange and ironic.
I became increasingly distressed. I was no longer going to be able to live and work in 27 countries around Europe. And that felt like a real loss to me.
Thomas Harding is British by birth, and like other Brits, he is seeking a European passport so he can continue to be part of the European Union. Only he is the descendant of Jewish refugees who escaped Nazi persecution.
My great-grandfather was one of the most prominent doctors in Berlin in the 1920s and 30s. His clients included Marlene Dietrich, Albert Einstein. This is my grandmother and her husband, Eric. There's a very real trauma. We were thrown out of Germany, our property was seized, my grandmother was kicked out of university, 6 members of my family were murdered in the Holocaust.
The Association of Jewish Refugees, which provides support for Jewish victims of Nazi oppression living in Great Britain, is now dealing with hundreds of requests by descendants of Jews to apply for citizenship of the country that forced out their grandparents.
Brexit has definitely been the driver in this. In fact, we received our first inquiry the morning after the Brexit vote.
German law allows anyone stripped of citizenship by the Nazis to get it back, including descendants. That same law has led many Israelis to get German citizenship. People have lots of reasons to live where they choose. The word homeland has become loaded and also inconsequential. So now scores of British Jews, some of them descendants of the Kinder Transports, are returning to Berlin because the benefits of the EU are above all. Ari O'Sullivan for IBA News.
The Rio Paralympics came to an end overnight, wrapping up 11 days of international sport with a festive closing ceremony at the Maracana Stadium. The Israeli delegation brings home 3 bronze medals, ending 74th in the overall rankings. Rower Moran Samuel, who carried the Israeli flag in the stadium, won her first Paralympic bronze, while shooter Doron Shaziri and swimmer Inbal Pizarro continued their previous Paralympic success, claiming 3rd place in their respective competitions. Israeli rowers Yulia Chernoy and Reuven Magnaji, whom we profiled here on IBA News before the Games, ended 9th in the TA mixed double sculls. The closing ceremony included a special tribute to an Iranian cyclist who died on Saturday after crashing in a racing event, the first such death since the Games began in 1960. The Van Leer Institute in Jerusalem has recently launched a new exhibition featuring the lost world of Slovakian Jewry destroyed in the Holocaust. Back now to Ari O'Sullivan.
In 2006, renowned photographer Yuri Deutsch began making portraits of Slovakia's last living Holocaust survivors. And one day, he came across an abandoned school in Bardejov, frozen in time from that day in 1942 when its students were taken to concentration camps. Left behind were shelves upon shelves of children's school books. His still-life portraits became the centerpiece of The Last Folio, a project currently on display at the Van Leer Institute in Jerusalem.
This one magically survived. So it became a focus of Yuri's work as a photographer, my focus as a filmmaker. The exhibition is accompanied by a 20-minute version of my full-length documentary about the project. And hopefully it is one small contribution to knowing the world that we came from.
Collaborating with filmmaker Katya Karusova, the exhibit includes a documentary and some small artifacts.
What is special when you talk about aesthetics of the desperation of this photograph is that if you are a child, you can imagine going inside the book and you can imagine the stories that were in it. That somehow each one of these is a portrait of somebody. And to me, this is a portrait of a school teacher.
One of the stamp says Deutsch Jakob. He was a tailor, and it says Michalovce. Katya found the book, she showed it to me, and she said, look what I found. When I look at the book, I realize this must be book which belonged to my grandfather, somebody who I never met. And I happen to have only one picture of him, and it's this one.
It will be on display until November 30th. Entry is free. Ari O'Sullivan for IBA News.
In finance, the stock exchange is up today and the shekel is mixed against foreign currencies. And in weather, temperatures in Israel are expected to rise tomorrow, remaining unseasonably hot until the mercury drops again on Thursday. And that's all for today. Join us again tomorrow when Laura Cornfield will be back with the latest. I'm Elon Aslan-Levy, wishing you a good evening live from Jerusalem.